everyone. Welcome to September's Plant Powered Conversations That Sprout Ethical Change. I'm Brieanah, and I'm joined by my friend Johanna.
Hi.
And today we are talking about recent events in the movement, upcoming events this fall, and some exciting news and new reports that are happening, kind of like a news roundup for you. There's a lot going on, so we want to make sure that you are getting the highlights. Johanna, where do you want to start?
Should we go like chronologically? Maybe you want to
Sure.
start with
That probably makes the most sense. Yeah, absolutely.
the SoulFest event that you went to. I mean, it's autumn now, but I had a very chill summer, so I didn't really go out anywhere. So I would really love to
Jealous.
hear what you've been up to.
I'm jealous. For those that don't know, I'm the marketing manager at Better Food Foundation. We were kept pretty busy this summer. We went to the Animal and Vegan Advocacy Summit in LA, and then turned right back around and went to the Vegan SoulFest in Baltimore. We went to the Vegan SoulFest specifically to launch one of our new projects called Flip It. And I'll put a link to Flip It below and Vegan SoulFest for anyone that's interested. But Vegan SoulFest in and of itself is a festival in Baltimore, Maryland. It's 2 days. They have a stage with music going on the entire time. They have a ton of vendors and, of course, delicious vegan food. And it's all about just exposing people to the ideas of eating more plant forward, eating healthier, the different choices and changes that they can make to live better. It's not necessarily meant to convert anyone. They're not out there being extremists and saying you have to be vegan to come and that sort of thing. It's a very welcoming environment. It's run by the Black Veg Society and Afro Vegan Society, which are both based in Baltimore area. And it's a very, very cool atmosphere. It's unlike like your traditional veg fest in the sense that its center is around culture, right? The music and the people are at the center of it, where in other veg fests that I've gone to, it's been very much about the new product or new sample. And while food is definitely a reason that people come because they have delicious vegan soul food available, it was as much hanging out and experiencing the community as it was about the food. So I definitely recommend anyone that is going to be in the US around this time. I think they might move it from August for next year. I'm not sure, but just keep an eye on their website and put it on your calendar. It was an awesome time.
Cool. I'm really happy to hear that. And I would love to experience. Don't know if I have the chance, but yeah, because a lot of the events I've been to, it's been very like focused on the food, like you mentioned, and you know, food is always a part of something bigger, like that. You know, there's food culture, but also a lot other culture around it, and like I love music too, and sounds really like a special event. How many people were there? Are we talking like thousands or like hundreds or okay?
Yeah, I think that is going to lead to a bigger venue for next year for sure. Now that they see like how popular it gets, and that is just a testament to the plant-based movement and that it's not going anywhere. You know, you still see those news articles or that one grouchy relative that's like, oh, this is just a fad. But when events like this are sold out, and we talked about this with Vegan SoulFest or Vegan Women's Summit, when we did that episode back in May, it was just so well attended. It's just showing that this isn't a fad. This is something that people are interested in, that they want to support, that they want to learn more about. So I think it just speaks to that too. And that made it extremely exciting to launch a new brand at an event like this too, where people are already excited, already wanting to learn. And then you have a brand that's all about sharing the stories of change makers in the movement to help inspire people to flip their minds and flip their plates to a more plant forward way of living. And it was just so well received. So it was all really encouraging. Working in animal and vegan advocacy can get draining. like any advocacy work. And so to be around a community that's like asking questions and engaged and wanting to share their stories and support each other, it was a really cool weekend. Yeah.
Cool. And
Yeah.
actually that reminds me, like, just a quick commentary. I used to go to a lot of music festivals, like when I was a bit younger, haven't been going so much lately. But there's this one like very popular festival, like in Helsinki, called the Flow Festival, and they, like, I should have checked my facts before, but I wasn't thinking about this before the recording. But I think they made all the food that they serve there like vegetarian or vegan, or at least like a high percentage. And it's not like a veg fest or anything. It's mainly a music festival, but it's just like very cool how, I mean, all levels of society should be aware of fighting the climate crisis and building a more empathetic world. But it's just like very cool to see like different events also. There's so many different ways to promote like more compassion and like veggie vegan lifestyle. So that was very cool.
Absolutely. Well, we saw it with was it the UN recently, right? That wanted to go more plant-based. We see it in levels in government. Every so often there's a news story about the school cafeteria switching to plant-based or offering more plant-based options at the very least. So you're right. Like there are so many sectors that we can think about changing. But yeah, I hadn't thought about music festivals before Vegan SoulFest. So it's cool to hear that it's happening in other countries too.
Yeah, cool.
So what other events, you mentioned that one, but are there some this fall that you're looking at, or?
So one I wanted to mention, there's actually one called it's unfortunately already past when this comes out, but maybe I will mention it in the notes anyways, like for next year. I think it's called the European Vegan. Oh man, now I forgot the name. But anyways, I will mention it in the comments. But like some European-wide vegan event, I think it's happening only for the second time. But the event that I really wanted to mention is the New Food Conference that's happening in October in Berlin, from the 26th to the 25th to the 26th of October. And it's Europe's first and biggest conference on new protein solutions. So this is more like, there are NGOs and activists there, but it's especially meant for like food professionals, people really like creating new kinds of plant-based and cultivated like meat solutions, and really to like understand where we are now. It's very like Europe, US focused. I was there for the first time last year, and I mean there was also talk about for example like Singapore, where the movement is also very kind of advanced because of the legislation, which is more, I don't know, relaxed or advanced than in Europe, for example. But anyways, like really talk about where we are with the food system and where we're going. There's like expert presentations, like panels and startup pitches. And yeah, like I mentioned, I was there for the first time last year and definitely want to go again. There was a lot of focus on networking there, and of course amazing food, like really amazing food, lots of chances to sample new products too, and really wonderful atmosphere. I talked to a lot of new people there, and I'm fairly introverted, and somehow it was just very exciting and inspiring, the atmosphere. And I remember feeling so just inspired and empowered after it, and just like I feel like glowing for a few days after, because it was so cool to be surrounded by, I guess, some hundreds of people who just desperately, like really passionately want to build a better food future. And yeah, so if anybody listening to this is planning to go to the New Food Conference in Berlin, let me know. I would love to hear from you. And if I definitely recommend everybody to check out their website. It's organized by Pro-Veg International. That's the NGO. They do a lot of cool stuff, and this is one of the events. So yeah.
I thought that was Pro-Veg. I was trying to think the whole time, like, which NGO puts this on? Okay, cool. That's awesome. And it's so cool when you get that energy, right? From the room with people that are excited about that too.
Yeah, I was just like buzzing. Like it was so cool.
That's awesome. That's
And
awesome.
what about you? Are you going to attend some events, or what would you recommend people to go to?
I think personally, I'm a little vented out for the moment. End of July and August, we're like, whew, enough for me. Like you said, a little bit of an introvert, so my social battery is low. But I do recommend Reducitarian. This year, it's in Denver. Reducitarian Summit is also run by an org, the Reducitarian Foundation. But they're all focused around food as well, of course, that's what we're talking about here, but from the lens of ending factory farming. So that's October 27th to the 29th. I believe you can still get tickets. Denver's
and who is it like meant for? Like, is there like I don't know, like a target audience, or just anybody who's interested?
Yeah, pretty much anyone that's interested. I mean, the thing about this one, where if we look at like AVA, for example, the Animal Vegan Advocacy Summit, like that one perhaps has more of an animal lens to it, right? Animal advocates. And while they're welcome at Reducitarian, you're going to hear from more of that tech side of it, like alternative proteins. You're going to hear from the environmental impacts of diet change, so it gets a little beyond an animal focus, and Ava did too, but Reducitarian specifically comes ready to like start at that broader focus than when you think about the animal impacts. I think is like the major difference. But yeah, anyone that's working in the industry, or like if you are an advocate, I'm not trying to discourage you from going at all. I think still be beneficial. It's still very open in that way. There's networking, you're going to hear from speakers, it's your typical summit in that way. So there's still a bunch to get out of it no matter what sector you're in the movement. But it is more that diet change impact lens from like a broader scale. And then speaking of like that climate impact with Reducitarian and that being a focus, the environmental impacts of diet change, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, as we pivot into news updates, that the Better Food Foundation just released a new report with Sentient Media, where we looked at 8 news outlets in the US and the UK and specifically analyzed their recipe sections. These news outlets have made climate pledges and that they're doing responsible climate reporting. However, their recipe sections aren't really reflecting that. They are very omnivore in nature, if not meat heavy. And so this report looks at how that climate pledge can be extended into recipe sections in these 8, and then makes recommendations for news outlets across the country, across the world, because this also involved the UK. But I just found it really interesting to look at the data behind the proportions of what is being shared and recommended to people. And of course, at least in the US, and especially with a certain past president, there's a lot of distrust when it comes to the media. And so whenever you're making findings, you're sharing findings or you're making recommendations about what the media should or shouldn't do, it's contentious, right? But at the same time, it goes to that responsibility in reporting accurately. This is where people get their information. This is where people understand what's healthy and what's not, what's good for their community and what's not. And so a more balanced, if nothing else, recipe section would provide a way for them to better hold up their climate pledge. And so the report ended up recommending several. Default Veg is the name of the campaign that Better Food Foundation runs, defaulting to the veg option. So default veg recommendations, changing the ratio so that there's a 2-to-1 for plant-based versus animal-based recipes, presenting plant-based options first, being the default, so that
Yeah.
people automatically see that as easier and they don't have to search for it, making it
Yeah.
harder to find. They could feature the plant-based options as editors' picks, put more
Yeah.
eyes on it that way. They could offer swaps for the animal options in certain recipes, feature plant-based ingredients. And then to the specific climate point, they could even put climate scores on these recipes. If
Yeah.
they want to really, really support
Yeah.
that climate pledge and show that they're being responsible climate reporters, they should put a climate score and let their readers know how their habits and choices are impacting what they care about, which is the
Yeah.
environment, right? So I just found it really interesting, and I'll put the link below to the full report for anyone that wants to read it. But we hope that people that read it in the movement will go to their news outlet and actually share it and say, hey,
Yeah.
I reader, here's some things that you could do better for things I care about.
Cool. This is really interesting. Actually, I'm definitely going to have a look at it, and also need to make myself a note to like share it here in LinkedIn. Like my gut feeling is like when I think about, well, I guess mainly the like Finnish media, like newspapers, like magazines, I see that there's definitely been a shift to like much more plant-based recipes in the last
Cool.
years. But this would be like really interesting to do in Europe too, or in Finland. Like what is the actual, like, because numbers don't lie. Like what what is the situation actually?
Yeah.
Like I was it's a few years ago now already, but like one of the, I guess she's like the most famous Finnish like vegan food blogger. Like she got a like a regular section in the biggest Finnish newspaper, like to like show her or share her vegan recipes, or like develop like
Oh, cool.
specifically for this newspaper. I don't remember how often actually the recipes come out, but there's been these shifts, but how, what's the actual percentage? That would be interesting to find out. But yeah, and this makes me think of like how they present food at supermarkets too, because it's very strategic, and it would be another way to really put like plant-based options onto the front. And yeah, because we really
Absolutely.
don't make decisions in a vacuum, of course. It's or yeah, cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know you had a study you wanted to share too.
Yeah, it's like a little bit. Well, I mean, this is all related that that we're talking about. But I came across this interesting study that I wanted to quickly go through. Like I'm just looking at my notes here. So, I mean, it's not really news to I guess anybody who's listening to us or watching this, but just the numbers were a bit like mind-boggling. So let me get to it. So this is about how the big meat, like the big meat or the meat industry, how its grip like really shapes what we eat, and we all know this, but yeah, just the numbers. So there was a recent like Stanford University study that looked at agricultural policies and analyzed support for both meat products and plant-based alternatives in the EU and US, and they found out, not a huge surprise, that government funding and lobbying like heavily favor livestock, traditional livestock. And now we get to the shocking numbers. So in the EU, like livestock farmers receive some like 1,200 times more public funding and three times more lobbying money, like compared to their plant-based counterparts. So 1,200 times more public funding. And in the US, it was about 800 times more public funding and 190 times more lobbying. Like lobbying money goes to animal source food than alternatives. And then in the EU, plant-based alternatives got just 0.1% of total like public money spent on meat. And at the same time, they also found out that in the EU, up to like 50% of the profits that like farmers or meat producers get, it's from subsidies. So it's not just, it's not even, you know, like it just goes to show that the system is so like it's so artificially like kept the way it is. And I mean, I knew all of this kind of the trend, but just to see the numbers, I'm a little bit shocked. And then they also mentioned that like another worrying thing, that the meat lobby's tactics, that they resemble a lot of those that have been used by the tobacco and the fossil fuel industry, like trying to prevent like public discourse on the negative impacts of meat consumption. And of course the effect of all of this is that the growth of like more sustainable and plant-based products and alternatives is much slower. And like why did I want to like bring this up? Because it's just like reminds us that it's really no coincidence what we eat and what we consider normal, that there are powerful vested interests that have an interest in maintaining this system, like the status quo, and it's the result of just decades of lobbying. My English sometimes.
No, you're good.
And yeah, because of the climate, like even if you don't care about animals, and I know everybody who's listening to this not like cares, but because of the climate crisis, it's like never been more important to confront this, you know, these interests and these lobbies. And now I wanted to like pivot a little bit or bring this back to marketing a little bit. Like I would personally love if more plant-based food brands who feel like aligned with kind of educating the public, like to or educating their consumers or their clients or their advocates, like really took on the job of talking about these things and like how problematic the food system is, because like a lot of people simply don't know. And anyways, we're going to need to do a lot of like, because of the food we eat, it needs to change, and that's going to mean a lot of educating about new like solutions, new foods anyways. And I would just love if more brands talked about this and kind of open the door behind the, you know, barns and the fields. Like I know a lot because I grew up on the countryside, and but yeah, I know a lot of people don't, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who would love to know. So hopefully that all made sense. But I was very fascinated by by this and shocked. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it all made
Terrified.
sense. It all made sense. Yeah, like you said, terrified. But part of what we do in this movement as marketers are opening people's eyes.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you that the education hook is something that needs to be used more, but needs to be used in a way that's not off-putting.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you still have to meet people where they are. You still have to say, okay, you know, do the analysis of your target customer.
Yeah.
Where are they? Are they actually problem aware, or do they think that eating a burger 7 days a week is totally fine for the climate and themselves, you know? Or do you have to educate on the problem first? And how do you educate on the problem with someone that's not even warm to the idea that it is a problem? So I think I totally agree with you. I see that many brands, and right now circulating, there's an ad where a woman eats yogurt and then starts bleeding from the mouth. And personally, I don't think that that's the way to do it. I don't think that that's the way to show the cruelty of dairy. It's shocking, and it got news headlines, and kudos to them if that was their goal. But if we actually want to nudge people into a more plant forward, more climate friendly, more animal friendly way of eating, the people that need to change are not people that want to see that, are not people that want to see blood, and like that's not going to convince them. We have to
Yeah.
think about what what are their pains and how can we speak to plant forward eating being a solution to those pains. I think that many ads like that miss the mark.
Yeah.
You were talking about those, but just as more brands adopt an education hook in their marketing plans, I think that it's a fine line and it's something that needs some research before being implemented.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And also understanding of your own kind of brand voice, like, are you like, yeah, how do you want to talk? And yeah, finding the sweet spot between your own voice and yeah, where your ideal client is, like you mentioned. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
um I
what did
know,
you want?
like, yeah, well, while we're talking about marketing, Jonna, I've seen a lot recently where brands are more frequently reporting on how they're changing their branding
Mm,
to be more like dairy. Or like when we did Impossible, we talked about how they created this new patty that was meant to mimic like a juicier, thicker burger.
yeah.
It raised the question, like, do plant-based products really have to become the animal version in order to compete, in order to
Mm.
succeed? So when we're talking about the education hook, I'm curious how you feel about branding as a whole. Like, what are you seeing as far as brands that are succeeding or changes that brands are making in order to stay relevant? Do you think that they need to adopt more of those animal-based
Mm.
products tactics in order to get at those not problem aware, totally unaware people?
Yeah. Well, interesting, or kind of, yeah, interesting that you mentioned this, because like this other kind of piece of news that I wanted to uh, bring up, which I will bring up in a second, it actually is related to this, because now
Mm,
in Europe we're trying to like figure out like what are we even allowed to call like plant-based burgers, for example. Like we're waiting to hear if that's like allowed or not,
yeah.
which influences marketing big time. But to answer your question, and now I got a little bit lost, but I think it really
It's a big question.
yeah,
I
it's a
don't
big
expect you to
question,
solve
but
everyone's marketing woes, but I am
yeah,
interested for your
but
perspective. Yeah.
I mean, I think I said I'm going to mention the same thing I mentioned when we talked about in Impossible, that it just really uh, depends on your like who you're trying to reach. And I think there's like no one answer, because like to some people like it's gonna appeal that they can just replace their burger or sausage with something that's very similar but
Yeah.
plant-based. Then others like we want to destroy the like food system and build something like much better or like maybe not completely, but you know, I guess what I'm getting at. And I think it's like, I think it's in some ways also a very like maybe Western way of looking at it. Like, of course, like I'm in Europe and you're in the States, but like but you know, food is so much more than like there are so many different kinds of food cultures, and like what branding works somewhere, or what kinds of products, like it doesn't
Mm,
work everywhere. And there's like so many amazing, like there's so much plant-based food here that is just has been around for forever, and it's not competing with
mm,
products. It's its own thing.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm yeah, I have a lot of thoughts around this, but not like a very clear answer.
No, I love what you're bringing up about different cultures and different people. So perhaps that completely unaware consumer in, let's say, the US that loves their burger 7 days a week, maybe you do need to take an impossible tactic
Yeah.
and produce your burger that mimics what they're eating, to kind of bring them into the conversation and show them that it's not
Yeah.
all this like gross broccoli or whatever that they grew up thinking,
Yeah.
that there are ways to eat exactly what they're eating, just in a more climate friendly way.
Mm.
Um, and then when you're talking about cultures, like even in the US, like as if we're looking at it as one market, there are pockets, right? And so you might have different tactics, different campaigns, different branding for just the US.
Yeah.
Different customers, but importantly, and I know that we want to do a future episode diving into culture. So on the list,
Yeah.
diving into cultures and the impacts that cultures have around food. And gosh, we lost so much of that in the US, but I know that you can speak to this far better than I can, of different cultures just having veg staples in who they are, in their history, in their
Yeah.
DNA. I mean, especially in Asia, right? When we think of like India with all the different curries and things that are already veg by default, you know, anyway, there's plenty of examples that I could share, and I won't go down that rabbit hole, but I think it's interesting when you look at it at a global scale. I'm really glad that you brought
Yeah.
that up
Yeah.
there.
And of course, yeah, it's just impossible to um, give a clear-cut answer. But I think if all this like mimicking, like or replacing traditional Western animal products, it for sure has its place, because this is also where a lot of meat is consumed, and we simply need to change that. And whatever ways work for the different audiences, then like that's a good way to go. But yeah, but the problem is definitely it's global.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Share more about that study, like what or the
It's
organization that
yeah,
you.
not actually. I'm looking at my notes again. It's not actually a study. It's more like a news item that I
Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
came across. So there's been this veggie burger debate or veggie burger ban in the EU, and I wanted to look up what the situation is. So to everybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, so soon, hopefully soon in the EU, we will know what companies are actually allowed to call their veggie products that mimic or try to replicate animal products. So the history is that back in 2020, the French government put forward a law to ban the use of certain terms for plant-based foods, such as vegetarian sausages and plant-based steaks. And I mean, their reasoning is like at the moment, these terms are unregulated, but their reasoning or argument was that they wanted to protect the consumer from confusion. Because if you get a veggie burger, like what, maybe you think that you're gonna buy like a meat burger, but anyways, but I think it begs the question, or like if you ask me, I think the real reason is that they might be afraid of the rise of the plant-based industry.
Yeah.
So the vegetarian union, the European Vegetarian Union, they challenged the decision because they, want to promote a more sustainable and conscious food choices. And now the situation is that the veggie burger debate has made it to the European Court of Justice, which is the top court here in Europe. And now we're waiting for the court to decide if like EU member states, because there's a lot of legislation that governs all the EU countries, but that if individual states can actually introduce their own additional laws like they did in France, or if it's against the, more high level European law. And for example, back in 2017, the same court, the Court of Justice, they ruled that plant-based foods cannot be sold in the EU using terms such as milk, butter, and cheese. So for example, here, when I buy oat milk, it's oat drink officially. We're not allowed to call it, or companies are not allowed to call it milk. Like, of course, people will keep calling these products whatever they want, but this is about what companies actually are legally allowed to do. And now everybody's waiting for this decision. It will be a big one, because it will impact the future of food labeling here, and of course it's going to impact marketing as well.
Right.
I mean, I personally find this really interesting and important, because like I come from a translation and like kind of linguist background, and like language is power. Like even if people are going to keep calling these products whatever they want, like language, like the words we use, it has the power to influence the world around us, like what we see normal, like what is a sausage actually, like do you need a dead animal for it or not? So I'm very curious how this is gonna turn out. And yeah, it's not gonna hold the change of the food system, but I think it's still I thought it's interesting to mention, because
Oh yeah.
everybody knows.
Well, and it's two copywriters. I'm sitting here like, okay, what are the power words that we could use here? Instead of drink. Like, you're not going to convince anyone that's completely unaware that like oat drink is sexy and delicious, and you know what I mean? Like, oh
on the
boy,
other hand, like
big one.
on the other hand, there are like these like plant milk companies in Europe that have come up with this like it's also material for like funny like branding and kind of marketing. Like, we're not allowed to call this milk, and then there's like some weird character LK, and it's so also, I mean, this
that's true. They're making the best out of a bad situation. I love it. That's such a good note to end on too, because I know we wanted to usually keep these to 30-45 minutes, not taking up everybody's day. But as you head back out, fellow listener, into the world and are thinking of how to up-level your copy for yourself or for your clients, what power words would you use to describe plant-based products? Let's brainstorm. I would love to hear some suggestions. And then I will also leave you all with, we are hoping to interview people in the future on this plant-powered series on LinkedIn. And we would love to hear from you if you have a story to share, a product to share, or you want to workshop some copy or branding. We're happy to give you advice on the episode. Reach out to us. Both of our contact info is in the post. We look forward to hearing from you and your ideas for future episodes, so we can keep plant powered strong. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. See you next time.